we are going to take a look at multiplying binomials today. This is from 8.3. A couple things we want to remind ourselves on are the rules for multiplication. Seems like it's a duh thing, but I see all the time these mistakes. If I have a positive times a positive, I should end up with a positive. If I have a positive times a negative, I should end up with a negative. If I have a negative times a negative, I should end up with a positive. Need to know those rules as well as the addition rules for the same sort of thing. Okay, we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can multiply binomials together and binomials and trinomials. So let's start right in with the distributive property. We've been using this a little bit already. It's just taking a term and distributing it to everything in the quantity or the binomial. So we know that 6c times c is 6 times 1, which is 6, and c squared. 6 times a negative 4 is a negative 24, and c comes along for the ride. The reason this works is the distributive property. So it says, hey, take everything term inside this one and multiply it by this whole thing. Take every term and multiply it by the whole thing. So 2r times r plus 3 and a negative 5 times r plus 3. That's what the real distributive property does. So we have 2r, and then I just have a monomial being distributed into a binomial. 2r times r is 2r squared, plus 2 times 3 is 6r for the ride. Watch your signs. Negative 5 times r is a negative 5r. Negative 5 times 3 is a negative 15. You should always simplify as much as possible. So we should combine like terms and get 2r squared plus r minus 15. Alright, let's try this again. This time though we have a trinomial being multiplied by a binomial. The distributive property always works. You take the term and multiply by the whole thing. So 2x squared times 3x minus 4 and 2x times 3x minus 4 and negative 6 times 3x minus 4. So be careful, you're distributing your negatives, so watch your signs. 2 times 3, that's 6x to the third, minus 8x squared. Then I'm going to distribute this stuff over here. 2 times 3 is another 6x squared this time. 2 times a negative 4 is a negative 8x. Distributing in my negative. Negative 6 times a 3 is a negative 18x. Negative times a negative is a positive. 6 times 4 is 24. Again, you should always look to see if you're in standard form and combine like terms where you can. So 6x to the third, there's no more of those, so that's done. Then we have an x squared and an x squared. Negative 8 and a positive 6, so I get negative 2x squared. I have a negative 8x and a negative. Both are negative, so I keep the negative and I add the terms, and I get negative 26x. And all I have left is plus 24. So it's just your PEMDAS rules, easy peasy. At this point, you should pause your video, you should show your work, practice the problems, and then come back and check your answers. Okay, there are your answers for your practice problems. Pause the video, check your answers, go back, rework the problems if you did not get them correctly, and then if you're still not getting them right, make sure you star them so we can talk about them in class tomorrow. Alright, let's try another method. We've used in distribution before, distributive property. Let's use a table. And this comes back from, if you go back to the top of your sheet, it deals with finding the area. So x times x is x squared. Well, x times x is x squared, so we have the same size shaped tiles here. If I have an x and another one, I have a 2 x's plus 1. So that's how this width is. And if I have an x plus 1, well, that's x plus 1. And once I take all these terms inside and add them up, that gives me my area that's showing up. So when we take a look at multiplying the binomials down here on the bottom of the page, that's essentially what we're doing. We're finding the area because we're multiplying 2 binomials together. So what you do is you take each term within this first binomial and each term within the second binomial to set up a table. I'm going to take x and I'm going to make a table with positive 3. So over here on the left, I take every term that's in this first binomial and I'll put it over here. And then across the top, I have the other terms from the other binomial. I have a positive x and I have a negative 5. So just like when we're doing multiplication tables, you know how to multiply this stuff. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 5 is a negative 5x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times a negative 5 is a negative 15. The stuff that is inside the table then becomes my answer. X squared minus 5x plus 3x minus 15. So all I'm doing is going through and picking up all the terms that were inside my multiplication table. We should simplify by combining like terms, and we get x squared minus 2x plus, minus 15. Let's try another one. We have an a, and I have a negative 2. That's going to go on my table. I have an a and a negative 13. So a and a negative 13. And I am multiplying. A times a is a squared. A times negative 13 is a negative 13a. Negative 2 times a is negative 2a. Negative times a negative is a positive. 13 times 2 is 26. So again, all the stuff inside is my answer. What you'll find that when we start doing really complicated polynomial multiplying is the tables will help you line up your like terms automatically. So diagonally we have an a and an a. Then we have an a squared and a 26 because there are no other squares or constant terms. What it does is it helps us be able to add these automatically. So I've got a squared. I know I have a negative 2a and I have a negative 13a. So total I have a negative 15a. And I have a positive 26. So let's try that when we're doing a trinomial times a binomial. Using a table method, I want to take each of my terms, 3a squared, I have an a and I have a 4, and I'm going to make a table where I'm multiplying by the other terms, 2a and a negative 6. 3 times 2 is 6, a squared times a is a to the third. 3a times negative 6 is a negative, 6 times 3 is 18, a squared. A times 2a is 2a squared. A times a negative 6 is a negative 6a. 4 times 2 is 8a. 4 times a negative 6 is a negative 24. And again, if we take a look at our diagonals, we already have our like terms lined up. Here's my a squareds, here's my a's. So that when I go to solve it or write it in simplest form, I already have it ready. 6a to the third, that's that one. I have a 2a squared and a negative 18, so that's a negative 16a squared. I have an 8a and a negative 6a, so that's a plus 2a. And my only constant is negative 24. Okay, using the table method, make sure you pause your video, practice the next couple, and then come check your answers. Alright, there are your answers. If you did not get them right, pause your video, rework them, see if you can get them right. Otherwise, star them so that we can talk about them tomorrow in class. Alright, our last method that we want to look at today is using the FOIL method. FOIL is just an acronym to help us remember the process of multiplying a binomial by another binomial. So this only applies to a bi times a bi. Okay? It does not work in any of the other ones. You need to set up a table or you need to use your distributive property. But if we're going to use FOIL, this is what it stands for. F is first, meaning multiply your first terms in each of the binomials together. So that's where they're first. Your outer means, hey, the outside one, outer edges, that's 5x and 1. Multiply those together. Inner, the stuff that's on the inside when they're lined up together, that's those two. And then your last terms. This is the last one of this first binomial, and this is the last one of this one, so you're going to multiply those together. It becomes a cheat sheet, easy way that you can use to make sure you don't miss any steps when you are putting these together. And it avoids the distributive property. Essentially, it's doing the same thing, it just makes it quicker for us. So let's try a couple. We want to use FOIL. First ones, multiply first ones together. 2 times 5 is 10x squared. Then outer ones are these outside ones, so negative 6h. Inner is these ones here, plus 30h. And last terms in each is a negative 18. You still want to make sure you are combining like terms, simplifying as much as possible. So what is that, plus 24? Minus 18. Just makes it easier so that you can quickly go through the process of multiplying these together. So if we do first, I'm going to go here. 3 times 1 is 3w squared. 3w times 3 is a 9w. Then I do my inside ones, plus 12w. And then I do my last ones, plus 36. Combine like terms. 3w squared plus, what is that, 21? 21w plus 36. And one more. First one's together. 6 times 9 is 54. C times c is c squared. 6 times negative 8 is a negative 48c. Watch your signs. Negative times a positive is a negative 18c. Negative times a negative is a positive 16. Combine like terms. 54c squared. I have both negatives, so it's going to stay a negative, and then I add the numbers together. 8 and 8, 16, carry the 1, 66c plus 16. Okay, again, you are going to pause the video, practice those problems, come back and check the answers. Alright, there are your answers for your practice problems. Make sure you got them right. Go back and rework them if you didn't. Indicate the ones that you're still struggling with. Before we move on, though, I want to talk about some shortcuts and ways to think about this, because eventually, like I said, we're going to go backwards. We're going to be given this trinomial, and we got to figure out which binomials are the factors of this trinomial. So we're going to work our way backwards. So I want to watch what we're doing. We should start looking for patterns. So I know that negative 9 times 5 was negative 45. So that's how I got my constant term. But if I take a look at and I multiply those together, I have a negative 9. And I have a positive 5. Well, negative 9 and a positive 5 is just a negative 4. So instead of having that extra step where then I have to combine like terms, sometimes I can take a look at it and do mental math. Here I know I have 3 times 3, that's 9x. Positive a 9x, and then I'm going to have a negative 2x. So positive 9, negative 2, that gets me my positive 7. So lots of times we're going to be looking at these, and the better we get at our multiplication terms and our adding, subtracting negative numbers, the faster this process will go. I have a negative 5b, and I have a negative 11b. Negative 11, negative 5, that's a negative 16. So start looking for patterns when you're working on these. It'll help you later on when we get to more complicated stuff. All right, last type of stuff we want to look at today are application problems. So if I am looking at this cylinder, and remember when I have a circle, if I go from the center of the circle to any point on the side of the circle, that's called the radius. And when I have a perpendicular segment between the bases, that's known as the height. Okay? So these are going to be a little tricky because there's lots of variables, lots of room for mistakes. But the process is exactly the same. So it says cylinder has the dimensions shown. So we know the radius is x plus 1 and the height is x plus 4. And we want to find the surface area. So everything around the outside of this cylinder, how much it exists. So we're going to practice using the surface area formula. So anytime I have a formula, I should start by writing down the formula. 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. That means 2 times pi times the square of r plus 2 times pi times r times h. Then it becomes just a substituting in the pieces we know. I know I still have 2 and a pi, but I know what my r is. My radius, because there's a term in between here that's adding or subtracting, we want to make sure we put these in parentheses, is squared plus 2 pi, r again, which is x plus 1, times my height, which is x plus 4. Now it just becomes crunching the numbers, watching your distributing, and following your rules. So I know I have 2 times pi times this r squared, because Pam just says I have to do my exponents first. So over here on the side, I'm going to do x plus 1 times x plus 1. X first, outer, inner, last. X times x is x squared, plus x